Too early for a statement win in this season? Well, the Vegas Golden Knights would suggest otherwise. Plus, Winnipeg Jets are in an interesting spot because their arena not quite filling up here every game so far this season, and are the Anaheim Ducks for real? We'll discuss all that and more on today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we welcome you into another episode of the Locked On NHL podcast, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any of our new content throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we talk about a big win for the Vegas Golden Knights over the Colorado Avalanche and where that puts the Golden Knights amongst the rest of the Western Conference. We'll also talk about the Winnipeg Jets and a lack of fans heading to the arena so far this season. And those Anaheim Ducks picked up a win against those very same Vegas Golden Knights and are off to a hot start. Is it for real? Or is it just a case of a young Ducks squad getting off the ground a little earlier than we expected? My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wilds, and joined by my Tuesday co-host, Nick Morgan of Locked On Predators. Nick, a lot to get to here today, but first, let's start with, let's play some numbers game. 7-0. The Vegas Golden Knights with a little bit of a statement over the Colorado Avalanche a few nights ago. And it, I think, just furthers kind of what we have said about this Vegas Golden Knights team is that it's very possible that this year's Golden Knights team is better than last year's.
Yeah, it's 7-0. That is a stat line you expect to see while playing the San Jose Sharks, not the Colorado Avalanche. Yeah, I mean, Vegas, that is a big win for them early in the season. Of course, though, they lost to Anaheim, which means Anaheim is now the Stanley Cup favorite. I don't make the rules here, Seth. But yeah, Ducks, Stanley Cup all the way. Let's go.
And you look at the Golden Knights so far this season, 11-0-1. They're 7-0-1 at home. And it's an Avalanche team that is off to a great start themselves, but it's just Vegas just continues to get it done with names that we're starting to hear more and more frequently. I mean, you obviously have your top level guys, Jack Eichel with 2 goals, William Karlsson with 2 goals. Mark Stone had 2 goals, had a 4-point night himself, but they're getting contributions from other guys on the lineup as well. William Carrier scored a goal for the Golden Knights in that one. And again, Adin Hill, 41-shot shutout against a pretty good Avalanche team. And so all those key areas, Vegas just continues to get solid production up and down the lineup, solid goaltending, solid defense, you name it. Find a weakness, because good luck, I haven't had an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, and I think you hit the head when you talked about Adin Hill and the 41 save shutout. That'll certainly do it. It's the defense and goaltending that I think is the foundation for what these Golden Knights do. It was the foundation for their success towards the end of last year into their postseason run, and it's been their success again this year. Adin Hill, remember, Seth, before the season, you and I were kind of debating. It's like, okay, like this guy was the 4th string, like entering the year. Like, you know, is he really going to be like a sustainable goalie, or is he going to kind of go into like that, you know, Scott Darling, Anton Udobin sort of territory where just guy gets on a heater and gets a big contract from there? No, Adin Hill is proving exactly who he was at the end of last year is who he is so far this season. 938 save percentage, 181 goals against average. Among regular starters, those are both top numbers. And Logan Thompson, we talked about him last year, all-star last year. Comes in, not, a lot of people were sure where he was going to fit in. Was he going to get the starting job back? Was he going to kind of just be relegated to the backup? He's wound up being really good in his own right with 923 save percentage. It's interesting that he and Hill have kind of evenly split the starts so far. And then you talk about that Golden Knights defense, and they've just been stifling teams left and right, top 10 in expected goals against per 60 minutes. They're not giving opponents a lot of looks, although they did give up 41 shots against Colorado. So, maybe a rough performance there. And it's kind of funny because you look at the offense and they are putting up big numbers. And, William Karlsson with 15 points, Eichel's got 14, 3 other players in double digits already. Their underlying numbers aren't that great. They're not in the top 20 in like Corsi for per game and expected goals per game. So maybe the offense is hitting a little above their batting average so far. But that defense and goaltending is going to give Vegas a chance every single game this season. If they're playing as well as they are right now, yeah, watch out because Vegas is going to be a tough team as we get later in the year.
And anytime you can go +3 in special teams while featuring 2 shorthanded goals as well as a power play goal, that's always going to be a tough hurdle for the opposing team to climb. And Vegas did just that. And 11 different players for the Golden Knights recorded a point in that game against the Avalanche. So just some continuingly solid work for this Vegas Golden Knights team. But as you mentioned, the peripherals, I mean, it's a Golden Knights team that as of right now is sitting at 5th in the NHL in goals per game at 3.77. Their power play percentage is solid, but it's outside the top 10 at 23.4. Penalty kill is at 6th in the NHL at 87.2%. And so, you get solid production levels in those key areas, and it just leads to you being able to overcome. If your offense is starting off slowly, say in 5-on-5, okay, we'll just take care of special teams opportunities. And if our offense is struggling overall, we'll just ride the goalies. It's like it just seems like a team that they can pivot to whatever is working well for them that night, that they just ride that until the offense comes around or they get a couple of early goals and they just push the tempo until the defense can kind of round into form to close things out.
Yeah, and I talk about underlying numbers in goals against and stuff like that. And there's certainly, I think metrics plays a big role in how we look at teams, but there's still those quote unquote intangibles that I think we miss. And that's just the team kind of figuring out how to change things on a fly and win games. And the Vegas Golden Knights are managing to do that. Like they have high shooting percentage. Some of these guys, I don't think William Karlsson's going to shoot 25% for the rest of the season, but he's been stepping up and scoring goals when they've been locked in close games. The other night, like you mentioned, 41 shots against the Avs. Their defense winds up, or the goaltending winds up helping the defense out a little bit. So it just seems like it's routine that if there's a piece of their game that's not going in any particular night, some other area steps up and carries a load. And that's what good teams do.
Yep. Yeah. 26 block shots against the Avs, 11 takeaways in that game, and just 3 giveaways. So stingy Vegas, just what we know them to be. And it continues to be a situation where fans are coming out to support the team in droves, much to the opposite of the team that we are going to discuss next. The Winnipeg Jets, their attendance numbers are pretty much near the bottom of the league so far. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about where Winnipeg's at right now. A little bit of a holding pattern for the Jets. We'll talk about that as we continue today's episode of Locked On NHL after this. Today's episode of Locked On NHL is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is incredibly easy to use, and if you're looking for some odds for tonight's games, the Carolina Hurricanes check in at -205 on the money line. New York Islanders -125. The Rangers at -152. Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues. The Jets are at -125. Some great plays for you this evening. If you have a $5 bet that wins, you can use those bonus bets for spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to kick off the NFL season. Again, FanDuel.com/locked-on to kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On NHL. Once again, we thank you for making the Locked On NHL podcast your first listen each and every day. Make sure that you tune in all week long to listen to our esteemed panel of experts that host the Locked On NHL podcast so you don't miss out on any of the biggest stories in the Eastern Conference, team by team, or any power rankings throughout the week as well. Nick, let's talk about the Winnipeg Jets, who, if I look at the attendance mark in the NHL, Edmonton Oilers averaging just over 24,000 fans per game so far this season. If you go down to the bottom of the list, obviously the Arizona Coyotes playing at Mullet Arena are averaging 4,600 fans, which you'd expect in a very small, intimate environment. Guess who is second to last?
I'm going to guess it's the team on our graphic, the Winnipeg Jets.
The Winnipeg Jets averaging 11,838 fans per game so far this season. Yeah, it's not great.
No. So we're both in agreement that they're moving back to Atlanta, right?
I feel like it's kind of the worst kept secret in the NHL right now is that it seems like there is destined to be a relocation, and Atlanta has already they've already done the groundwork to make this happen. And there will be nothing that would make me happier in my entire existence is to see the return of the Atlanta Thrashers.
Yeah, there we go. We're talking about throwbacks. That's a throwback right there. Let's get those powder baby blue jerseys on the ice, people. Look, I don't want to cast stones on the Winnipeg fan base. There's been a lot of articles out there kind of explaining this and breaking it down. And of course, there's tough economic situation going on right now, especially kind of in the more rural Western Canada. A lot of people just don't have the money to go, drop $100 a night at, a Jets game, especially when the team isn't that fun to watch. I mean, sorry, but they're not. I mean, they have a winning record right now. Good for them. But there's you don't watch this team and see excitement on there. Yeah, I mean, it's tough to be in that situation right now where you're not gonna want to just drop something on a midweek game and travel and go see this team play in person. You can probably just watch them at your neighborhood bar or watch them at home. And get that same sort of experience. So I get that there's that aspect of it, but I think it's telling, and a couple of articles have explained this, Seth, is that last year, leading up to the postseason, the Jets had the most lucrative marketing campaign since they've moved to Winnipeg. They've spent a lot of money to try to grow awareness of this team and try to get new fans into the seats. And it just hasn't worked. And I'm curious, is it the fact that this team is kind of spinning its wheels? and they're just kind of stuck in the middle. They've been sort of in the same place almost their entire time there, albeit with one Western Conference Finals appearance in 2018. Or is there maybe a little bit more to this that meets the eye, Seth?
Well, the on ice product certainly factors in, but I feel like there just are so many more like longer entrenched options that people are gravitating towards, I think, in Canada. I mean, you've got Calgary, you've got Toronto, you've got Edmonton. I mean, take your pick. You've got these long established teams that have already been here. People have been devoted fans to them. And I'm not suggesting that Jets fans aren't devoted to the Jets, but it seems like it was something where you're trying to add to what is already there for established franchises. And look, whether or not it ends up being Atlanta, if they do move, Atlanta is a sports town. Atlanta has the Falcons, they have the Hawks, they have the Braves. They have some very rich sports history in the town of Atlanta. Fans loved the Thrashers when they were there. And so I think if the NHL is looking at an opportunity to try to take a team like the Jets and say, okay, attendance numbers aren't great. What if we put them in a market where there just is a huge influx of sports fans? Is that going to change into something that people are going to watch on a consistent basis? And I don't think it's any secret that the NHL is thinking about this because, yes, I know a lot of the talk was about Arizona being a team to relocate, but I think it was interesting in some of the comments that were made around the time of Arizona is it seemed like they were just talking about the notion of relocation, not specific to a team, which leads you to believe that there were a couple of different teams where relocation has been discussed.
And I get the fact that they probably don't want to move Arizona just because that is a big, big TV market.
Yes.
And apparently, their games are on basic cable now because of some of the new deals, and apparently the ratings have gone up in Arizona. So, I think the NHL wants to go all in. Compare that to Winnipeg, which is the smallest market in the entire NHL. Maybe there's a little bit more of a, okay, we don't really want to spend a lot of time and money in this. Ownership has publicly come out and said, hey, we don't want to move. The NHL has, kind of hinted like, hey, we're going to do what we can to keep them in Winnipeg. But somebody has pointed this out. There's been a lot of kind of talk from like Jets organizational people about 1994 and 5 and 6 and kind of being like, hey, remember then? Don't let that happen this time. Almost kind of threatening Jets fans. It's like, hey, why don't you show up and we won't move again? And of course, the simple explanation, Seth, is that the airplane bringing fans into the games doesn't have anywhere to land.
Yeah, that's also a bit of a factor in it as well. But ultimately, the NHL wants to be in the most profitable markets that you can. And when we think of spots, I mean, Atlanta just is one of the, I think, bigger sports markets that there is. And so it doesn't, whether or not they end up saying, okay, we're moving back to Atlanta or going to other places, like Atlanta just is way further up the line in terms of a sports market than, like you said, than Winnipeg is. It's the smallest market in the NHL right now. And don't tell me the NHL isn't looking at that and saying, hey, isn't there a way that we can kind of bump this up the ladder a little bit?
Yeah, and don't rule out Houston either, and don't rule out Kansas City either.
Ooh.
Those are two markets that the NHL has kind of been eyeing, and two markets that do have some decent hockey history between them. So, yeah, it's a possibility.
Well, and you could give the state of hockey two teams. We could have a Minneapolis Minneapolis whatevers and the Minnesota Wild. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, just interstate rival. I was gonna think you were gonna go like north and go like War Road or something like that.
Oh, a northern Minnesota pro team would be electric.
Yeah,
Like
just have the games outside at that point.
Outdoor arena, you just build like a baseball stadium essentially and just have the games outside. That'd be electric.
Throw some bleachers around the lake. I think you got it.
Yeah, just a bunch of lawn chairs, 16,000 lawn chairs just on the ice.
I think we just pitched the next Winter Classic right there.
God, we're coming up with way too many good ideas on the Tuesday show. Now, we're going to finish by talking about a team that has gotten off to a really good start, and I don't think it's any coincidence that it has to do with their amazing alternate jerseys. But we're going to talk about the Anaheim Ducks because we talked about the Vegas Golden Knights getting off to a good start. Well, guess who just beat them? The Anaheim Ducks. So we'll talk about the Ducks. Are they for real? As we continue today's episode of Locked On NHL after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. A new NHL season brings all sorts of possibilities. Jack Hughes could wind up leading the NHL in points. The red-hot Anaheim Mighty Ducks could hoist the Stanley Cup. And the best possibility of all, you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, or Connor Bedard will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. So you can bet on whether Connor McDavid is going to have more or less than 2.5 points in his next game, or whether Crosby will go over 0.5 goals in the next game. To win a 100 times bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
Final segment of today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. Seth Toupal joined by Nick Morgan of Locked On Predators. Let's talk about the Anaheim Ducks, who have the greatest alternate jerseys in the NHL. Hands down. It's not even a discussion. And they just beat the Vegas Golden Knights 4-2 with 4 goals in the third period, including 3 of which were scored halfway through the third period, including an empty netter to seal it with just over a minute to play. Nick, are the Anaheim Ducks for real?
As we mentioned, they are Stanley Cup frontrunners now that they've beaten the Golden Knights. We do not make the rules here. We just, kind of have to point out what everybody already knows.
Yeah, it's a team that I think is playing well to start the season, and this is where the new coach effect comes into play for me. I think is you have a little bit of a different spin on the message that has been sent to that team over the last few years. You've got a very young roster. You've got an exciting roster. Greg Cronin so far has been pushing all of the right buttons to get this team to play to their potential, and is getting them to believe in themselves early on to where they've come out of the gate and have played some really good hockey. And let's not overlook the fact that we are seeing, I think, a little bit of a renaissance from Mr. John Gibson, who was brilliant in that game against the Vegas Golden Knights. And on the season, he's got a 2.67 goals against average, 910 save percentage, but he's not even the biggest story in net for the Ducks this season, as it's Lucas Dostal, who is 5-1 so far with the Anaheim Ducks. And so they're getting great production in goal. They're getting great production on the ice. It feels like it's still maybe a couple of years too early for them to really make a serious run, but you got to be encouraged with what you've seen from the Ducks so far this season.
Yeah, as long as, Sam Carrick scores 2 goals a game and Frank Petrano continues to be second in the NHL in goals, I think the Anaheim Ducks are good. Yeah, look, it's a good story for the Anaheim Ducks. The numbers don't necessarily back up the record right now. They're 29th in Corsi for percentage, 29th in expected goals percentage, but 4th in shooting percentage. So it kind of gives you, kind of maybe they're getting, a little bit more luck than they would normally get in some of these games to drive home the point. So their expected goals for per game are 2.8 per game. Their actual goals are 3.32. On the other hand, their expected goals against per game, 3.58. Their actual goals per against are 2.87. So there is a lot of kind of overachieving going on for the Anaheim Ducks. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can throw out everything that's going on in sort of this early run, Seth. Mason McTavish, who, a lot of people consider him the best prospect on the Anaheim Ducks right now. Some people say even maybe a little bit better than Leo Carlsson. On fire right now, 13 points in 11 games this season. That is absolutely something Ducks fans got to be excited for. Pavel Mintyukov, who was a really good pickup on the blue line, is playing a really good rookie season, maybe playing his way into the Calder conversation right now. So there's a lot, even though, I don't think Frank Vetrano is going to be an Austin Matthews level scorer for the rest of the year. I don't think Adam Henrique is going to just pace the NHL in points, but there are some things that you can take away from this Ducks. You mentioned goaltending. I mentioned, a couple of younger players playing well that the Ducks fans can take away and say, okay, this is a good sign. This is something that we can build on.
Yeah, and it's a situation too where they've had some real lean years. I mean, they had maybe the worst defense in NHL history last year in terms of the number of shots that were allowed and the opportunities for opponents. Thankfully for them, the San Jose Sharks exist this season and are looking to just blow those numbers out of the water. But this is what you want to see from a young team is you want to see them take a step, and whether or not it ends up being something that's sustainable, you just want to see a pulse from a young team that has struggled over the last few years, and they've more than accomplished that early on this season. So you got to be thrilled with what we've seen from the Ducks so far. Again, best alternate jerseys in the NHL, not
100%.
even anybody else on the list. And so for that reason, it makes them intriguing to watch. It is interesting. There's been a lot made about the Leo Carlsson game management program so far this season. And I know fans are frustrated that you're not seeing a rookie get an opportunity to play, all the time. And Pat Verbeek has been pretty upfront about the fact that they want to try to save him for down the stretch, because let's not forget, you can look like the best player in the world in college or in, the AHL or lower levels. NHL is just different. And so I actually applaud the fact that they're trying to just make it so that it is digestible for Carlsson right now, with giving him opportunities for just little breaks here and there, just so that he's not getting overwhelmed by everything that's going on at the NHL level, because there's so much more that goes into it beyond what you see on the ice. And so I like the fact that they're just trying to kind of make it a little more easy for him to not get overwhelmed by what's going on at the NHL level. And I think that just helps further the fact that they've got a plan and they're sticking to it.
Yeah. Plus, he's 18 years old,
Also that.
There's not a lot of people that can come in at 18 years old. I was still in high school at that age. or just starting my college career, and this guy is playing professional hockey against a bunch of veteran NHL players. So I think we need to kind of just take a step back and be like, look, this is, sort of a marathon for Leo Carlsson's development and not a sprint. And, the games he's been in, he's looked really good. And credit to Cronin for kind of giving him a long leash. When he is playing, he's getting, 13, 14, 15 minutes a game. So he's getting some time to be an impact player. But again, like you don't need to just throw him out there on the first line every night and be like, look, he's your guy, especially the way the Ducks are playing right now and having some guys step up. You can be a little bit more patient, put him in situations where he's going to succeed the best, maybe take him out where, maybe there's a learning curve that he's not quite ready for yet. Ease him in. So I'm with you. I don't read too much into the, now and then healthy scratch for Carlsson.
Yeah, it's as the Joker said in The Dark Knight, it's all part of the plan. So
great quote to end on.
Yeah, that's a good spot to just leave it. So Ducks fans, we are envious of your alternate jerseys and just really happy to see that Anaheim team, who has been a little bit of a mess over the last few years, start to get back to where they are hoping to be as they move forward. So more of that on the way, hopefully, and we'll keep an eye on them throughout the rest of the season. But that will wrap up today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we thank you for tuning in each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes all week long with our rotating panel of hosts here on Locked On NHL. You can find new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.